All right, guys, how's it going? Nick here with Late Night Chess, and welcome to part 3 of our Rook Endgame series. In the last video, we looked at a position that was very similar to this position. In fact, I'll show it to you really quickly. So this was last video's position, and we showed that with black to move here, black can actually draw by checking the king back and forth, and the white king has no shelter, and black can just continue to check back and forth, and if ever the white king gets too close, the rook's going to sweep under and take the white pawn. Interestingly enough, though, here in this position, right, again, the difference is just one square where the king is now on g8 instead of g7. It's black to move, and black still cannot draw. So this is a win for white. Let's see why. Let's just really quickly recap why in this position it's a draw, even with black to move. Rook a8 check, and then basically the idea is the rook is just going to check the king back and forth, and the king would really like this rook to provide shelter for him to stop any of the checks. But as soon as the king comes over to the f-file, now the black king can sweep in and take the pawn, right, after rook e1 to defend rook a8, and black is going to draw this position by taking the pawn. But interestingly enough here, if black tries for the same thing, white has a very useful resource, and it's all because the king is on g8 and not on g7. So let's take a look at why black still loses this position. So after rook a8 check, king d7, this should look familiar, rook a7 check, king e6, rook a6 check, and now the king should not come to the f file for the same reason. This black king can come in and take advantage of the pawn, but instead king e5 instead of king f5. And then after check, here's the key idea. But before in the other position, when the king was on g7, this f6 square was not available to the king. But now it is. Now the white king can come into f6, and this does not allow the king to come in and go after this pawn because both of those squares are defended. So we've made progress here as white because the goal, again, is for this rook to give shelter for the king to stop any additional checks. And so if rook a6 check, now the king can come back to g5. He doesn't have to defend the square anymore because now the rook is defending it once he comes off the f-file. And then after rook a5 check, the king comes up to g6, and now the king is ready to white is ready to block the check with rook f6. And now this is going to be a win for white. For example, after the rook takes, king takes, white's going to be able to promote the pawn immediately. It's also important to note that here at rook a5 check, it's too early to block with rook f5 because after black takes, white takes, now black can play king f7 and stop the pawn, right? And so it's really important that the white blocks the check once the white king is on g6 so that you can go rook f6. Okay, cool. So interesting to see how just one change in position of the king can lead to actually a win for white instead of a draw for white. So stay tuned for the next rook and endgame position. It'll be coming up here pretty soon. And if you like this video, definitely hit the like button and hit the subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks, guys.